His people will always remember him as George VI, the gentleman who became king by accident. But for most of his adult life, he was just Bertie, the shy Duke of York who'd joined the Navy. He was plunged into action in 1916 when his ship, the Cumberland, was fiercely engaged in the Battle of Jutland. He fought bravely and was mentioned in dispatches. But suffering from stress, he was sent home to raise money for military hospitals. For years, Bertie had been pursuing a young woman called Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. He finally caught up with her on a happy day in 1924 when they were married. It was the wisest move he would ever make. Elizabeth was the perfect partner for Bertie. She had charm and lightness of spirit. She'd grown up among aristocrats, but she'd none of that royal stiffness and reserve. She alone could help Bertie overcome the stammer that had given him an almost pathological fear of speaking in public.
We are here in your mansion house, my Lord Mayor.
He'd been born a natural left-hander, but his parents, thinking this somehow eccentric, had forced him to become right-handed. The enforced change had left him with a speech impediment that would haunt him for the rest of his days.
In the empire overseas, our May Day call.
Bertie's idea of happiness was to be with just his wife and daughters, and no one else. That dream was about to be shattered by his brother Edward, the newly crowned king, and the mysterious American gold digger who'd stolen his heart. Edward would leave the throne, and Bertie, who'd always shivered with fear at the very thought of being king, would now be crowned in his stead. The public would give him no more than a polite welcome. But George VI would soon be tested as few monarchs had ever been. Britain was at war. The first great battle of World War II came in 1940, the one they would call the Battle of Britain. Nothing like it had been seen or lived through before. Bombs rained from the sky. Londoners walked through a city that seemed destroyed. Then suddenly, they saw their own king and queen walking towards them through the rubble, bringing comfort to the shocked and the homeless and the bereaved. The royal couple had been advised to leave London, but they both refused to go. Even when the German Luftwaffe made the royal family a target and bombed Buckingham Palace, the king and queen refused to move house. They had raised a banner that a whole nation would follow. As the tide of war began to turn and British troops pushed on through Africa and Europe, the king was never far behind, rallying his lads as victory beckoned. And it was their king that the people called for on that day of victory. Only one day would match it for happiness. His daughter Elizabeth's wedding day in 1947, when Prince Philip joined the family. In February 1953, as the king saw his daughter off, people remarked how old and frail he looked for a man of 56. True, he'd had surgery for cancer, but he was fine now, wasn't he? No, he was not. He died a few days later. Work stopped, and the country came to a halt as the nation mourned with an intensity that would have amazed him. The modest man, with a tender heart, who became a great king. The future Queen Elizabeth II was born in 1926, the eldest daughter of the Duke of York, a man second in line to the throne. But even then, she was known as the most famous child in the world. When her father unexpectedly became king after his brother's abdication in 1936, the young princess's life would change forever. Hers was to be a life of duty, and the training began in earnest during World War II. She showed herself at once glamorous as well as practical. At the war's end, she, along with her sister Margaret, slipped out of Buckingham Palace and into the celebrating crowds, the last time either of them would be granted anonymity. Both of the princesses recall this moment as the most memorable of their lives. On her first ever foreign trip in 1947, Elizabeth's joy was unconfined. She was in love with a sailor prince called Philip. At the same time, she was aware of her duty as heir to the throne and was confident enough to announce it to the world.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
Later that same year, she and Philip announced their engagement. Children followed quickly, Charles in 1948 and Anne in 1950. Unbeknown to any of them, her father, George VI, had only a short time left to enjoy his grandchildren. In 1952, he died, and Elizabeth was now queen, and in the following year she was formally crowned. Some observers noticed that the joie de vivre of her early years was exchanged as the crown was placed upon her head with a new solemnity as she took on the role of monarch. Her jobs would be many and various, from presenting the World Cup to knighting heroes of the nation and spreading good PR for the monarchy across the Commonwealth, from Canada to the South Seas. It is the Commonwealth which has been perhaps her greatest passion during her reign, and her diplomatic skills have been a key element in keeping this disparate family of nations together. She has looked on as her children have married one by one, even allowing the solemn royal expression to slip just once in a while. She has also looked on as tragedy and disaster has raged around her, from the destruction of her childhood home of Windsor Castle to the unexpected death of Diana, Princess of Wales. This last event caused a sea change in the way the royal family expressed themselves. The Queen in particular, many observers have noted, has become a more approachable, less solemn figure. She remains that fascinating paradox, a traditional woman who is still ready to adapt to changing circumstances. Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark was born in 1921. When his father was sentenced to death by a revolutionary government, the family fled their home on Corfu, evacuated by the British Royal Navy. Philip's uncle was Lord Louis Mountbatten, and he proved an important influence. He brought the young prince to Britain to be educated, first at Cheam in Surrey, and then Gordonston in Scotland. He flourished at the notoriously tough boarding school, becoming head boy and excelling at the traditional sports, such as cricket. In 1939, he found a new home and one of the great loves of his life, the Royal Navy. 2 months into his new career, he met for the first time his future wife. Some detected the hand of Louis Mountbatten at work. After all, he was uncle to Princess Elizabeth too. Whatever the truth, the meeting at Dartmouth Naval College was a great success. Elizabeth and Philip stayed in touch. During World War II, the young prince found glory as first lieutenant at an almost unprecedentedly young age of 21. Seeing action in the Indian Ocean and Japan. His picture found a special place in Windsor Castle during his absence. But if the prince was to improve his chances with the princess as far as marriage was concerned, he needed to become a naturalized Briton, and with the tireless efforts of Uncle Louis, he did. On July the 8th, 1947, Buckingham Palace announced Elizabeth and Philip's engagement. Courtiers had doubts about this jumped-up foreigner, and the king believed his daughter still too young to get married. But the public, starved of romance after the war, got behind the idea and cheered the young lovers all the way to the altar. Philip did not forsake the navy, and with George VI's blessing, he took command of a frigate based in Malta. Here, in this secluded island, the married couple would enjoy a happy and private life. A first child, Charles, was born in 1948, and soon royal duty would overtake the prince's naval ambitions and the quiet Maltese life. His father-in-law, George VI, died in 1952, and Philip had to pledge allegiance not to the sea, but to his wife, the new queen.
I, Philip, will become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. In faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die, against all manner of folk, so help me God.
Philip, though, was appointed Admiral of the Fleet in 1953, so he could at least stay in touch with his first love. He and the Queen added to their family with Anne in 1950, Andrew in 1960, and Edward in 1964. Rumours of infidelity, though, have dogged Philip. Throughout his marriage, Philip has always argued that with a life spent in the public eye, when would he ever have found the chance? For her part, the Queen has never commented on the rumours, and theirs has remained an indivisible partnership for over 50 years.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years. And I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know.
Although a man not given to regret, he once said, "What you wish to be remembered for has nothing to do with it. You can wish all sorts of things. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen." No one would have dreamed that this pretty Scottish girl called Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, born at the very beginning of the 20th century, was destined to marry the future King of Great Britain. Many were astonished when, in 1923, she married the next best thing, George, Duke of York, the Prince of Wales's younger brother. The death of King George V in 1936 signalled the first shock in what would be a shattering year for the royal family. The new king, Edward VIII, would reign for just 10 months, until his obsessive love for the American divorcee Wallis Simpson would compel him to abandon the throne. So early in 1937, Britain crowned an unlikely monarch, George VI, who his friends called Bertie, a diffident, painfully shy man who would need a strong arm to lean on. And Elizabeth, his queen consort, would provide it, from this day to the end of his reign.
The responsibility lies on the shoulders of one man. By his latest act of naked aggression, Hitler has committed a crime not only against Poland, but against the whole human race.
As Britain braced itself for air raids, hundreds of thousands of children were evacuated to the country, and Britain's most famous mother broadcast a message of hope and good cheer.
Many of you have had to see your family life broken up, your husband going off to his allotted task, your children evacuated to places of greater safety. The King and I know what it means to be parted from our children, and we can sympathize with those of you who have bravely consented to this separation for the sake of your little ones.
When the royal couple visited victims of the bombed British cities, they did so as fellow citizens and fellow sufferers. it did wonders for morale. May 1945, VE Day. The vast, deliriously happy crowd hailed a king and queen who'd been so steadfast in the long years of struggle. Three years later, Princess Elizabeth, now married to Prince Philip, produced an heir to the throne, a boy called Charles. His grandmother, the Queen, was delighted. But her happiness was short-lived. Her husband, the King, lost his fight with cancer and was dead at 56. The nation mourned. Now, even in her grief, the old Queen gracefully stepped aside to make way for the new Queen, her daughter Elizabeth II. From the moment of her daughter's coronation, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had stepped into the shadows to let the spotlight fall on her daughter. She recreated herself as that beloved figure, the Queen Mum. In the year 2000, she celebrated her 100th birthday, and the family, as well as friends and well-wishers, turned out to celebrate. What must she have thought as she sat there? Her husband gone nearly 50 of those 100 years. Wars had been fought and won. Prime ministers come and gone. Republican sentiment had swelled, subsided and swelled again. But here she sat, an enduring reminder of a lost age. It seems fair to say about this extraordinary and indomitable woman that we shall certainly never see her like again. Princess Margaret, the tiny figure seen here sandwiched between grandmother, Queen Mary, and sister Elizabeth, spent a lifetime wondering who she was. This is the fate of the second in line to the throne. From her father, George VI's coronation in 1937 onwards, Elizabeth was groomed to be sovereign. But what was Margaret's role? As a child, she was vivacious, playful, and sometimes naughty, often spoiled. She was her father's favorite, and she loved him intensely. She grew into a beautiful young woman, but the rebellious streak followed her into adulthood. She smoked in public and wasn't afraid to show off the royal bosom. Men flocked around her, of course, but by the time Elizabeth married Prince Philip of Greece in 1947, her heart was set on only one. His name was Peter Townsend, a member of the royal household and a Spitfire ace decorated in World War II. In love with him since the age of 15, Margaret glowed at the prospect of their future life together. But there was a problem. Townsend, 16 years older than Margaret, was a divorcee. It was left to her mother, whilst they were both in Africa, to tell Margaret that the match was constitutionally impossible. Whilst they were away, Townsend was transferred to a job in Brussels. Upon her return to Britain, Margaret made little attempt to disguise her broken heart. She yearned for him, the love of her life. Her sister, though, brokered a deal. If Margaret could wait 2 years until she was 25, then she was legally able to make her own choice. And so she waited. Soon after her 25th birthday, crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace. The word had spread. Townsend was back, and the two lovers were meeting to decide their future. When Townsend emerged, it was to say that there was no relationship. Margaret had been given a terrible choice. Leave her family and all the trappings of royalty behind to become plain Mrs. Townsend, or give up the man she loved. She gave him up. In 1960, Margaret did marry. His name was Tony Armstrong Jones, a photographer. As swinging London burst into life, they became the glamour couple with Margaret, the party princess. They had 2 children, David and Sarah. But all was not well in the Jones family. Tony was a creative individual, used to making his own way. His royal role, 2 steps behind his wife, never suited him, and no one was surprised when he found an excuse to go back to work. The marriage ended acrimoniously in 1976 with claims and counterclaims of adultery. How ironic that the princess denied marriage by divorce should now become the first member of the royal family to get divorced. By the 1980s, the party princess was having to face facts. Her lifestyle was damaging. She drank heavily, and in 1985 she had part of her lung removed, but it still didn't put her off cigarettes. Over the years, her royal duties were cut back and back until she became a peripheral figure on the royal scene. After a succession of strokes and painful accidents, Princess Margaret died in February 2002. And so remained that most unfortunate of people, a free spirit trapped by fate. Prince Charles, the son and heir of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. The child that neither of them really knew how to handle, and a boy raised mainly by strangers. His mother, so often seen at a distance, became an extraordinary thing when Charles was only 5. She became Queen. Her official duties took her across the world. Her children Charles and Anne were able to watch firsthand sometimes, but more often than not stayed at home. Prince Philip's plan was to toughen up the shy and insecure Charles at the institutions he had attended as a young man. First Cheam, near London, then Gordonstoun in the Scottish Highlands. At both, Charles was miserable. There was some respite in Geelong in Australia, where the active outdoor curriculum did not come with the attendant beatings as it had done back in Britain. Charles would recall those few months as the most precious of his childhood. His next obligation lay in Wales, where he completed his university education after having started out at Cambridge. Wales was chosen not by him, but by politicians. It was all part of his preparation to become Prince of Wales when he reached 21 years old, a popular role for an heir waiting to assume the throne, as well as a public relations strategy to quell the increasingly impatient voice of Welsh nationalism. After a spell, serving in all 3 armed services, Charles gradually began to find his own voice, a precarious balance somewhere between a playboy prince and a liberal social reformer. But his light would be outshone by his bride-to-be. From the start, the public fell in love with Diana, and while they applauded Charles for his good taste, his own popularity would be eclipsed by hers. The marriage started well. Charles forsook his mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles, to devote himself to his wife. Prince William was born in 1982, and Prince Harry followed 2 years later. But Charles was still finding his own identity. He tried subsistence farming in Scotland for a while and became a passionate advocate for the then unfashionable cause of organic farming. He recognized that some people saw him as perhaps a little eccentric.
Only the other day I was inquiring of an entire bed of old-fashioned roses who were forced to listen to my demented ramblings on the meaning of the universe as I sat cross-legged.
But his frustration at how the public perceived him exploded when he realized his powerlessness in the face of his wife's effortless seduction of the media during their messy breakup. The often savage battle fought out in the tabloid press came to an abrupt end with Diana's death. From that moment, Charles had to start all over again. He had to introduce the formerly despised Camilla Parker Bowles to a skeptical public, create a bond with her children, whilst trying to protect his own from the relentless invasions of a hungry media. If wisdom is gathered from experience, then Charles may yet have his chance to be a wise king. Prince William, heir to the British throne, has lived his entire life in the spotlight. From his unveiling as a 3-day-old baby in his parents' arms on the steps of the hospital to his much-publicized trip to Australia at a year old, the cameras have been relentless in their pursuit of him. Charles, his father, had spent too long parted from his parents whilst they were on their royal duties. Diana, his mother, wasn't going to let that happen to her children. As a toddler in the garden of Kensington Palace, perhaps he had an inkling of what was to come and made a bid for freedom. There is, though, no escape for a future king. He was joined by a brother, Harry, in 1984, and with their mother's encouragement, they were able to enjoy moments of what would pass as a typical modern childhood. Dad, it seemed, was left in charge of the rather more mundane royal chores. Charles and Diana's marriage was famously not a happy one. And in 1992 they split up, but remained committed and involved parents. Here, both attending William's first day at Eton. The breakup of his parents' relationship, with all the negative publicity, meant eyes were turning towards William as the long-term future of the monarchy. Diana's death in 1997 was a great personal tragedy for both her sons, but there was little peace for either of them. A grieving public demanded an opportunity to share their grief, and so William and Harry had to forego their own sadness in order to put on a brave face and thank the crowds for being so sorry at their loss. Such intense moments of tragedy and responsibility so young must leave their mark. For the eldest child, as his father found, the royal burden is much heavier to bear. A younger sibling, even if the press are pursuing him, can slip into the background if necessary. The heir to the throne must show no reticence. There is an upside, of course. Being treated like a touring rock star and having free gifts thrown at you can't be all bad. Especially if your father is at hand to show you how to do it. Since their mother's death, the two brothers have inevitably grown closer to their father-protector. Charles and William are seen together a lot. Some critics have accused Charles of using William to boost his own popularity, whilst others argue that his is the benign guiding hand that he'd been denied in his own childhood. William's charm appears effortless.
He's a lovely toy boy. He's lovely.
And his ability to flirt an instinctive talent.
He's absolutely handsome. Oh, beautiful.
When it comes to the concerns and interests of the younger generation, roles are reversed, and he becomes his father's guide. William has avoided the usual Oxford and Cambridge royal route and has chosen St Andrews in Scotland instead, a place he's entered on his own merits. His uncle Edward caused a commotion when his company was caught filming William surreptitiously for a documentary. The storm blew over after a few angry words from Charles, and William was left to what he and his father doubtless hope will be 4 precious years of seclusion before the royal merry-go-round really begins in earnest.